No doubt you recognize the subject of this drawing, sir.
My God, this is uncanny. It's an illustration of 221B Baker Street, accurate to the smallest detail.
The home of one Sherlock Holmes and his associate Dr. Watson is imagined by the artist Russell Stutler. An earlier draft of this was featured in the London Financial Times. And while other illustrators have attempted to capture the apartment, the prestigious Smithsonian Magazine declares Stutler's illustration to be the most elegant recreation of Holmes and Watson's quarters.
Remarkable. This print is signed by the artist. Do tell, sir, from where did we obtain such a rare and celebrated piece?
From the artist, of course. And we have two special bonuses tonight for our viewers. First, we're giving away this signed drawing. And second, we'll be discussing the drawing with the artist himself. Over cigars, of course.
Really? Tonight?
Yes, sir. As Sherlock Holmes might say, the game is afoot. Hello, and welcome to Cigar Ops. I'm Todd, and next to me in the domed hat is Tim. Since this episode is all about Sherlock Holmes' world, we thought we'd show up in period outfits. The bowler suits you.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm not much of a hat guy, but I know these were favored by Dr. Watson and many other men in Victorian London.
Which is a time and place depicted in Sherlock Holmes stories. Now, Tim, you know Russell Stutler, right? The one who created the famous drawing?
You could say that. He's my brother, and he's going to be joining us shortly.
Well, at least if the skills of Aldo, our technical guru, are up to it. Russ lives in Tokyo, Japan. We're in San Diego. So he is 16 hours ahead of us. It's about 8:30 on Friday here, which makes it about 1:30 tomorrow there. So Aldo, the plan is for us to smoke a cigar with someone 16 time zones away, right? Are you really going to be able to make that happen? Aldo?
Yeah, I'm here. After COVID, it's no big deal to set up this kind of thing. But shouldn't you just keep smoking that pipe instead of a cigar, since you're presenting as some kind of poor man's version of Sherlock Holmes with an angry raccoon eating his face?
Harsh, Aldo. Harsh. And no, this is Cigar Ops, not Pipe Ops. Plus, it turns out that Sherlock Holmes smokes cigars more often than pipes, even though he's better known as a pipe smoker.
So which cigar did you choose for tonight?
Since the great detective enjoyed many a cigars at Baker Street, I've picked one that would be found at his favorite London tobacconist, the Partagas 1845 Clasico Churchill.
Oh, wait a second. This is long before Churchill was well known.
True. The 1845 comes in several shapes in addition to the Churchill. But we had to pick a size and shape available both here and in Japan, which led us to the Churchill. It has all the same tobaccos and flavor as any other 1845 Clasico. Speaking of which, our artist is standing by in Tokyo with an 1845 in hand right now. So we'll review it after patching him in. But before we do that though, you should tell everyone about the giveaway, Aldo.
You cannot get this acclaimed print anywhere else in the world. It is a high-quality, first-generation reproduction printed on museum-quality paper and signed by the artist.
What are the rules for this giveaway?
Pretty simple. Submit a comment to this episode. We will randomly draw a name from those comments in a few weeks and then mail the winner their signed copy of the illustration. Subscribe if you want, but you don't have to for this giveaway. But if you want the Baker Street drawing, we are going to need your comment.
What if it's a nasty comment?
Let's get Russ on the horn.
Just a second. I can deduce the type of school you first attended as a child.
What?
Elementary, my dear Watson. Hello, Russ, and thank you for joining us for this very special cigar operation.
Hello, Todd. Good to see you again. I have some great memories of smoking cigars with you and Tim. Some amazing cigars from your vast collection there in California.
Oh, yeah. A long time no see. Thanks for joining us to talk about your Baker Street drawing.
Glad we can get together this way.
Well, before talking about our special topic tonight, or tomorrow for those of us in Tokyo, is our custom and our way here at Cigar Ops to first fill our hands with cigar and drink.
May I have your glass?
Absolutely, you may.
And Todd, what are we drinking here today?
We are drinking Sherlock's favorite drink, whiskey and soda, San Soda. But we do have Partagas.
Let's see if they're the same.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Looks the same to me. Todd has been cutting his cigars lately with a knife.
Yeah. This period piece, Opinel number 6.
Gentlemen, light them if you got them. Choice, Todd.
Mr. Russ, we're lit up here and we have our drinks poured, and it looks like you're lit up as well.
Kanpai.
Kanpai.
I hope you enjoy this cigar. It starts out a little bit sweet, and it's got complex flavors. It's somewhat mild. It's very approachable. In the back of your mouth, you'll get a little bit of spice, but it's mostly those flavors. Anyways, first off, how's life in Tokyo?
Well, between the killer quakes and the typhoons and the volcanoes, can't complain. But it's right now it's pretty hot and humid.
Well, let's talk about your illustration. Yeah, we're looking at your web page. It contains far more detail about the drawing than we'll be able to cover here, as well as many other things Sherlockian. We'll put up the link to your website so that the viewers can check it out for themselves. You've done 3 versions of the drawing. The first one in 1995, I think?
Right. 1995. I was still relatively young. I'd been living in Tokyo for about 8 years at that point.
What originally interested you in doing this project?
Well, I'd been smoking pipes for about 12 years at that point, and I thought it would be a nice thing to start reading some classic literature that featured pipe smoking. And of course, Sherlock Holmes was the natural choice. So I bought a couple books of the Sherlock Holmes stories and read them all through. These are the Sherlock Holmes, the Complete Novels and Stories, Volume 1, Volume 2. And there are no pictures in these at all. As I read these stories, I became fascinated with 221B Baker Street, which was Sherlock Holmes' apartment, or as they say in British English, his flat. And so I started taking mental notes, and then I started writing the mental notes on the back and the inside cover. And so I also started scribbling in pencil on a blank page what was forming in my mind. I kept erasing it and adding as more details came into the stories. And this is it right here. And eventually, I thought I need to write this to make a nice drawing in ink. For no reason other than I wanted to do it as a challenge. And so
Bird's eye view.
Bird's eye view. A bird's eye view. Now I discovered that a few years before I was born, there was a bird's eye view drawing of 221 Baker Street, published in the Strand Magazine, which was where the original Sherlock Holmes stories. It was apparently done by an American. His name was Ernest Short. It wasn't satisfying. For one thing, he apparently didn't understand that the British first floor is actually the American second floor. They have the ground floor and then the first floor. And so he put Mrs. Hudson's rooms in the basement. So I decided to make a proper illustration without really knowing what I was going to do with it after I drew it.
Let's get back. I can't tell if this is hand-drawn or created by a computer program. Can you tell us your process for producing it?
Sure. I did have a computer at the time. It was a Macintosh with a whopping 1 gigabyte of memory storage in it, which was cutting edge at that time. But I didn't have the tech savvy or even know if I could draw on a computer at the time. So I got pen and ink, just cheap copy paper, and those Rapidograph technical plant pens that I had left over from art school. And as a matter of fact, recently I found those drawings, that original drawing. Here it is.
Oh, wow.
Here's the first part. Here's the middle part. And let's see, it had 2 side ones. It was too big for one piece of paper. So here's the other one.
Thing's huge.
Yeah, it was big.
Yeah. How was the Baker Street drawing introduced to the world?
At first, it was just there, and I didn't know what to do with it. But I am a teacher, and I was teaching at a junior high and high school, and I thought, I can use this. It's English. And so I printed up smaller, and I added a sheet of questions like, where is the table? Where is the window? And then the students just had to circle it. It was like an exercise. It was kind of a lame exercise, but it justified it. After that, I discovered that Japan has their own Sherlock Holmes club. It was called the Sherlock Holmes Club in Japan.
I think there's a lot of Sherlock Holmes clubs, or a number of them at least, in Japan. How'd you find them?
I think I found them on the internet, and so I sent them by mail a copy of the illustration with the questions, and then they used it. They published it in their newsletter, which is called The World of Sherlock Holmes, and the questions are right there in the book. This is the first time the illustration appeared in a print publication. I was absolutely thrilled.
That's so cool. You updated the drawing after that at some point, right? I think in 2008?
That's right. It was 13 years after the first drawing. I was a bit older.
Why the update?
Well, I liked the stories so much after I'd read them initially that I continued to listen to them in audiobook form while I was doing other tasks that didn't require much mental activity. And as I listened to them over and over, more things were popping out, and more details that I had not included in the original. And it got to the point where I was getting a little bit embarrassed by what was out there, my original drawing, so I decided to make another one. I scanned it, and I had a digital version, and I modified it on my computer.
Well, what are some of the differences between the original and this 2008 version?
The most obvious change, at least to me, is the orientation of the sofa. It was now at an angle so that Sherlock Holmes could actually see the face of Watson. And there's a story where he's observing Watson's face, and Watson doesn't know it, and he comes out and tells Watson what he was thinking just by observing his face. And so I made the sofa at an angle. I also added a plate of oranges in the cupboard.
The 5 orange pips.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one.
All right.
And I also made the furniture a little bit more fancy because my concept of ancient furniture was being raised in the 1960s, and this was like 100 years before that.
Is this a version that made you famous?
That's the one. I started getting emails almost right away from magazines, from book publishers, even from game developers. The London Financial Times contacted me within months and wanted to use the illustration. They wanted to feature it in an article. They wanted to call it Holmes Sweet Home. And
Clever.
So,
Clever, yes.
it appeared in the London Financial Times, and I was a little bit nervous about my illustration appearing in London, where the heart of Sherlock Holmes and Sherlockianism, and where there might be a lot of experts. But I didn't get any angry emails, so I was relieved.
I'm looking at the second version that you have here, and from a distance it looks like it's got grays in it, but this is all just black and white, right?
Exactly. It's all black and white, so the grays are just hatching. Anyway, a few years later, the Smithsonian Magazine wanted to do an article on the illustration. And they had some very high praise for it. And so
I believe it said it was the most elegant.
The most elegant.
that's the word, the most elegant, yes. And also, the illustration appeared as a big poster in an exhibition, either in a museum or something like that, in Italy. And it was accompanied by a 3D virtual reconstruction of the illustration. It was amazing. As far as books, it's been published in several in languages I can't even read. For example, here's a small one in Russian. And here it is. Here's the illustration right there on the inside. And then there's another huge Russian book. This is a playful thing. It's got little props in it and like magnifying glass. And this was on Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother. Yeah, there it is, right there. There's the illustration right in the middle.
I can see how the drawing became famous. And of course, the current illustrations appeared on the most illustrious stage of all,
What's that?
Cigar Ops.
Of course. Of course. I'm a big fan of Cigar Ops, actually. Especially that strange character. Aldo? Where is he, by the way?
Aldo's in the control booth.
Hello, Tim's older brother in Japan.
Oh, hello, my favorite character, Aldo.
Well, speaking of cigars, I want to ask you about Sherlock Holmes' enjoyment of cigars. Any mention of that in his stories?
The stories have Holmes and Watson smoking cigars all the time. When they were by themselves, or when Holmes was by himself, he'd smoke a pipe. But when they had visitors, they'd all be smoking cigars because it's more of a social activity. You don't offer a person your pipe. That's kind of gross.
Right.
He and Watson and their guests from Scotland Yard would often relax together with cigars and also with whiskey and soda. They even had their own soda maker, which was called a gasogene.
In your current illustration of Baker Street Flat, you've included some of his cigars.
That's right. There's a case of cigars, a little case, about 5 cigars, that Sherlock Holmes would toss to people when they came by. One story has him throwing it at Watson.
Something like this? Oh, jeez. Sorry, that's not a lot of cigars, Russ.
He also kept a large supply of cigars in a coal scuttle. We think of a coal scuttle as kind of a bucket type thing next to the fireplace, but there was also a box type of coal scuttle with a nice lid on it, and it would make a good humidor for cigars, and he stored most of his cigars in there.
Is that one of the changes you made in that in the current version?
Yes, in the current version. I didn't know about the box cigar, coal scuttle in the earlier versions, so I put it in the third version.
Getting back to your Baker Street illustration, you completed the current version in 2022, correct?
That's right, and that came about because of an email exchange between me and Tim. He'd seen an interview I'd done on the illustration, and he emailed me and said, "Why don't we print a really nice, frameable edition of the illustration?" I thought, well, if we're going to do that, maybe it's time for me to make a third version, make it absolutely perfect. Over the years, there have been a few comments and criticisms of the illustration. For example, someone said that the stairs were too steep going up to Watson's rooms. And also the bow window, I made a bow window. It only has 3 panels. It was described as a bay window, which I discovered had more than 3 panels. It was more complex. So I decided I'm going to make the new version with all these changes and also add a few more elements that I had not added in the original ones. For example, I wanted to make all the elements in the illustration things that were actually existing in Victorian London and not just out of my imagination as I had done in the past.
And what are you drinking?
This is Fuji Single Malt. It's a newcomer to the whiskey market, I guess. It's a Father's Day present for my children.
Hirsch Reserve Selected, and this is a birthday present for my son.
Back to the Baker Street illustration. Did you use the same drawing process to create this?
Well, by this time, my last computer had died, so I had an iPad Pro. I did everything on the iPad Pro, and I started from scratch. A lot of the illustrations out there, other people have drawn 221B Baker Street since I did. They all fit into the layout of what's called a terraced house. They are long, narrow dwellings, and Baker Street was full of them. They were for the working class. They didn't have fancy bow windows and all that. So I started from scratch, threw everything out, and tried to make it in the form of a terraced house. But as I went into it, I realized a terrace house doesn't work. So I went back to my original architecture, and that's what you see in the illustration.
You have a version of this on your website that labels items in the illustration.
Right. It's the annotated version. And yeah, this one has the secret passages that are in the adventure, the Mazarin Stone. 2 secret passages going from Sherlock Holmes' room.
Okay.
One's an extra exit, and one leads next to the bow window. Also, there are bullet holes in the wall that spell VR, which I think stand for Victoria Regina, or Queen Victoria. Sherlock Holmes loved the Queen.
Tell us about some of the other differences. I think you had some differences relating to the illustrations.
Exactly. This time around, I wanted everything to be authentic, according to the Victorian era London. So I used this book and all the illustrations, and if any element in the illustrations appeared, I used that illustration exactly as it appeared.
The Paget illustrations.
Yes, exactly. Paget, he died while Arthur Conan Doyle was still writing the stories. So in the later stories, other artists picked up, but they used his style. And any other items that were not in the book, I just went online and found antique auctions and found those exact pieces, and I drew those.
On your webpage, you enlarged several of the details of this drawing. I want to talk about one of those, Sherlock's face. Can you tell us how your depiction came about?
Well, there are many variations of Sherlock Holmes's face in the illustrations throughout the years, but I had to base these on the original Sidney Paget illustrations. But even those faces went through evolution. The early drawings of Sherlock Holmes by Sidney Paget were of a handsome young man because he based them on his brother, who was a handsome young man. But later, they started to evolve because Arthur Conan Doyle's original concept of Sherlock Holmes was an ugly, strong man with a big hawk-like nose and eyes close set together, and his hair started to recede so that he had just a tuft of hair on the top of his head. And eventually, the illustrations evolved into that.
Now, this is a little off topic, but you have an AI-generated version of Sherlock Holmes' face on your webpage. Can you explain how that came about?
I'm in love with AI-generated images. And so I asked the AI to make a portrait of Sherlock Holmes. And I gave it all the description, the prompts, like the big nose, the close-set eyes, and the tuft of hair on the head. And I mentioned Sherlock Holmes, which was a mistake, because when I mentioned Sherlock Holmes, what came out were portraits of Benedict Cumberbatch. It threw out all the other prompts and just made illustrations of Benedict Cumberbatch. So I asked the AI again, and I did not include the name of Sherlock Holmes, and it came out with some pretty good illustrations, and one of them was close enough that I could tweak it and make it look like Sherlock Holmes. I had to take out an extra finger, which is still a problem with AI.
And you have an AI-generated picture showing the curbside view of 221B Baker Street. Well, that looks like a cozy retreat for a cigar.
Yeah, I'd love to go there and sit there on a cool evening smoking a cigar and having a whiskey and soda. I asked it originally for 221B Baker Street, and it gave the standard terraced house. So I didn't mention 221B, and I just said, give me a Victorian apartment front with a bow window in Victorian London. And it came up with several illustrations, and one of them was good enough that I could use it, and so I just tweaked it a lot, and that's what's on the website now.
Well, what are your thoughts about the cigar we're smoking tonight, the Partagas 1845.
This is a fantastic cigar. I'm not an expert by any means, but it's very mild and it has good flavor. I really love this cigar.
Mild with flavor. I think that's a very astute observation. And it's mild, but it's got a symphony of flavors. You know, kind of sweet. Maybe it's like a white sugar, but you can pick up a lot of things in this. It's a blend, like a little bit of licorice and sweetness, and then it's got that kind of baking spice flavor. When you get when you do your retrohale, instead of coming out as pepper, it's almost like a strong spice.
But this is very nice. It has a very distinct flavor. It is mild, but the flavor is very pronounced.
So we can recommend this cigar, right?
Oh yeah, this is excellent.
Yeah. Well, Russ, I'd like to thank you for joining us to spill the details about your famous art project. It truly is famous, all the publications and all that, incredible. Your Baker Street illustration really is, how should I say, a creative triumph full of intriguing surprises. And one lucky viewer will come away from this with their own signed copy.
And if we see an interest, we'll sell copies, signed and unsigned, on our store as soon as we set up the store. But if you want to win a signed copy now, be sure to submit a comment.
A nice one? Any final thoughts from Tokyo?
Well, this cigar has spoiled me. I don't usually smoke a good cigar unless someone buys one for me. But I think I'll have to go out and buy a few more of these.
In our next episode, we're holding the second big Cigar Ops poker game, complete with Tim's gourmet hors d'oeuvres. And we'll be reviewing the Chillin' Moose Corona. You won't want to miss that. But for now, Kampai.
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 Cigar Ops out.